I'm Eleanor. Welcome to my channel. And today it's actually Saturday night here in Sydney, Australia, where I live. And I thought this might be a good opportunity to start a new series, see how I go, called Saturday Night Wine Chats. I might come up with a better name. Let's wait and see. So I have a little bit of red wine, and I thought it would be an opportunity to kind of look back at my week and what I've been thinking. So this week I've been thinking a lot about creativity and what is helping me to be creative, what sort of creative works I have been reading, and also the obstacles to creativity. And of course, creativity can mean different things to different people, and basically what is your goal. So Matt Wall in his channel had a video a few days ago that basically asked the question, what do you want? So what do you want from your reading? What do you want from your writing? And what do you generally want from your day-to-day life? And it's a deceptively simple question. It's very complex and it's very helpful. I don't know. What do I want from my poetry reading and writing? And I came to the conclusion that I want to follow my curiosity, to discover new ways of using language through poetry, and to perhaps do that also through my writing. And I'd like to look at it as a hobby. I'm also thinking about what I consume as far as podcasts, really. What am I listening to? What am I allowing to inform my own creative process? Now, at the same time, I've been going back again and again to this book by Lucy Brock-Broido. As you know, if you've watched my other videos, she's my newest discovery. This book is called Stay Illusion. And I've been going back again and again for the last few days, and I'm sure it'll change as I continue. And I've been finding that when I go back and dip into the book, it's like dipping into an imaginary world. And I know I've used that phrase a lot lately in my videos, and it sounds like I'm paying, lip service to some sort of, imaginary world, a language world. But in this case, I'm really not. And I was reminded of an interview with, it was on Rachel Zucker's podcast called Commonplace, and specifically the interview with Bernadette Mayer. I didn't have time to find the exact place in the interview, but at some point in the interview, I'm pretty sure from memory, this was a few years back, but I've never stopped thinking about this particular aspect of her creativity that Mayer presented. And she said that she has a dream that is a repeating dream. And she's had it for years. And in the dream, there is a town. And there are roads, and there are shops, and there are homes. And she knows her way around it to such an extent that there's a cheese. This is funny, but of course, the most creative minds are funny like that. And it's her favorite cheese shop in this dream town. And she goes there and she will choose a cheese and buy it. And there was just something about that was so refreshing and so intriguing. And years later, I'm still thinking about it. Is it possible to have such a fertile imagination that you can, even if it's only in your dreams, you can still access a different town with different shops and choose a particular favorite cheese from that favorite shop? And so then I come to Stay Illusion, and this is not going to be a book review, but it's just a jumping off point. And I've been thinking about, how at first I would and have described this book as difficult. And then I read or heard, where did I hear it? I heard the word bewildering instead of, oh, okay, I know. Oh, okay, so this is another thing I did this week. I did a craft lab through Brooklyn Poets with Jay Deshpande. Jay Deshpande is one of my absolute heroes. He's a fantastic poet, but it's not really his poetry that I'm going to again and again. It's his teaching. He is an incredible teacher. Back in the day, years ago, I did a workshop with him, poetry writing workshop, and I've never, I'd never experienced that kind of feedback before. The particular way that he went through poems was entrancing. Since then, I've had, another teacher, but suffice to say, this is about Jay Deshpande, because he was the one who said, let's use the word bewildering. And I found that very refreshing, because the minute we say something is difficult, I think of an obstacle that is very much a negative. It's an obstacle that you want to get rid of. And then I listened to this podcast with Matthew, I forget his last name, anyway, from Slee Records. And he had a 2-part series about difficulty. And I found those 2 episodes so utterly dull, so deeply unproductive. And so there was Jay Deshpande going, you know what, let's just not even call it difficult, because that's not even helpful. If we really want to understand what's going on, let's just look at something that's utterly bewildering. That opened up things for me and helped me. And debating why we should have difficulty in poetry, and if there's any meaning towards it, and why would poets even make things difficult, that all belongs in a different world. It's a world that is utterly devoid of imagination. So if you're writing poetry analytically, and there's certainly a place for that, you don't want bewilderment. You don't really want bewilderment, unless that is your actual subject. You want absolute clarity. In fact, sparkling clarity that you can see through like a beautiful jewel, like a lovely lozenge, some words to that effect. And okay, that's something to strive for. But this week I was looking for help with productivity and imagination and joyfulness. And I was coming again and again to this book, which, funnily enough, is, with the title of the book, Stay Illusion. That's really what I was trying to do this week. I was trying to accept my imaginary world, my odd visions, my feeling that sometimes words just come into my head out of nowhere and need to be put down. The idea, as in the podcast, there's another podcast which I just listened to an episode of. The first part, not this week, but last week, the 2 hosts of Breaking Form talked about a poet, I forget her name, it doesn't really matter, and she claimed that she was walking in a field. She lived out in a rural area, and a poem came to her, and she felt that she was almost being chased by the poem, and she had to race race back to the house to quickly write it down before it either engulfed her and was ruined, or she forgot. Now, I'm not a woohoo kind of person. As I mentioned before, I'm not into ghosts, I'm not into the supernatural, and I'm hardly really a religious person as well. But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any poet who hadn't had a moment of that happening. And I think it's just a magical thing that happens. It just happens. And then Carl Phillips, I heard him say something. I don't even know where I was listening to an interview with him this week. Maybe I read it. And he said, yeah, I think I read it online this week when I was, browsing down some rabbit hole. And he said, I'm writing these poems for myself. And I'm really glad people are getting something out of it. And a lot of people are getting a lot out of it. But I'm writing them because I'm compelled to write them. And this is my world. This is the world I live in. This is my language. And I feel that, what's my goal? My goal is to open myself up as much as possible to that feeling. On my deathbed, I don't care who's reading my poems or who's, I have done things in my life. I know that I've touched people in different ways that are positive. Yeah? And I feel that is my legacy. Being kind to someone, holding my tongue when I'm critical, bringing up my children, working on my family relationships. This is my legacy. My poetry, I don't need that as my legacy. And I certainly don't need fame. I do need community. And on my deathbed, I'd like to be able to honestly say that I explored my own creative process, whatever that meant to me. And I produced something that it didn't all stay in my head, although that's interesting too. But I produced something, and in my case, that production is through language. I think that's a really worthwhile thing to be proud of in and of itself. So that takes me back to that, if you've been playing along, in one of my previous videos, I talked about I think it was only like 2 videos ago. No, wait a minute. It was the last video. It was the last video, the tag one, of course. And I was talking about how I did this workshop where it was held, the workshop was held in the grotty basement of, a Brooklyn bookstore. And I remembered that one teacher, there were two teachers, 2 poets who were helping us. And one of them, her name is Emily Skillings. She's a great poet. She's very, very interesting, very active in the poetry community in New York. And I still remember her so incredibly fondly, as I do the other one, Simone Kearney. But in this case, Emily Skillings, it was about 2/3 of the way through the workshop, and we came across, they had every week, the 2 of them, Simone and Emily, would bring some poems that we'd read together, and then we discuss our own poems and whatever. And they brought, one of the poems was, I think it might have been a Gertrude Stein or someone in that vein. And I thought, oh, this is fantastic. This is my shit. This is my stuff. And then, of course, inevitably, someone in the workshop says, oh, but what's the point of this difficulty? And I'll never forget the look on Emily Skilling's face. It was the look, very subtle, of utter boredom. I felt, and I don't have any proof, but I felt from the look on her face it said that her look said to me, I have been teaching a lot. I've come across this conversation a lot about difficulty. It's utterly boring. It has no, it doesn't further, it doesn't get you anywhere with your work, with your creativity. It's a debate that continues in circles and circles. We will not even grace it with a look. And she managed somehow, I don't remember how, to just steer the conversation away from the debate. So we accepted the little poem as it was. Yes, you know, it doesn't make sense. Now let's move on to the next one. And there's a certain kind of acceptance that gives everyone space. It's not as if the person who was bemoaning the difficulty of the poem was in any way put out or upset, and they weren't. They definitely weren't ignored or put down. It was just a masterful teacher steering the conversation away from a productivity killer and moving on to creativity. Creativity, imagination, the unique personality of each poetry writer, each poet in the room, to keep our eye on the prize, And I think if there's one thing that can summarize what I've been going through this week, is that, in fact, I think I may need a bit of my wine, because I'm getting a bit emotional actually, because my own creativity means a hell of a lot to me. And you know what? If it doesn't mean a hell of a lot to you, then get out, because all the other stuff, like, go into something else, you know? If your imagination doesn't interest you, go into journalism or essay writing or non-fiction. But even then, you probably have to have imagination. I mean, in ModPo, we start every year. I mentioned ModPo in the preview. Go to my previous video if you want to know what ModPo is. But ModPo is this free online forum. People discuss strange poetry. And we always start with Emily Dickinson, the House of Possibility, you know? The House of Possibility poem. And I was thinking of possibility. And I was thinking, it's more than possibility. It's opportunity. Poetry gives me an opportunity to find a way into someone else's imagination. And when I write for myself, for fun, it's an opportunity for me to delve into that. It's really as simple as that. It's as simple as that. That's why it's bewildering. Even the simplest poem is often bewildering. I mean, Shakespeare's bewildering. You know, like it doesn't necessarily make sense. Emily Dickinson is definitely if you want to have difficult, if you want to go for difficult, go to Emily Dickinson. You know, I don't understand. Like 2/3 of the poems I've read by Emily Dickinson, I don't have a clue. But I keep going back because I get more and more when I read them. If I want clarity from a first reading, I will go to an essay. I was having lunch with friends, and we were both deep in our thoughts. You know, it's very nice to have a friend that you're so close to that you don't feel an obligation to talk while you're having, a meal. And I said to him, I said, you go to poetry for clarity. Hey, and like his water came out of his nose. Like he was laughing so freaking hard. It's hysterical. It's hysterical. You go to poetry. And I was saying it as a joke. If you like clarity, why are you even doing poetry? I don't know. So to finish off, oh, wait a minute. No. There's something else that's connected to the clarity, lack of clarity, bewilderment. The idea that you have an obligation. As a poet, as a professional poet, you shouldn't hide behind your words. You should be upfront. Hide is a negative. Again, if you don't want to read something that's playing hide and seek with words, you obviously don't like poetry. This is what poets do, but it's not hiding. It's not hiding. It may feel like hiding, but it's a reticence. Now, why do you have a reticence? Because you've come to poetry realizing the limitations of language. You realize that when you pick up a book of poetry, even when it seems on the surface to be very clear, that is actually a sign of superficiality. You know, a poet doesn't just understand exactly what they feel and think at every instance and decide that, no, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to write a metaphor and see if people can guess what it is I'm feeling and thinking. No. The poet is trying to figure out what they're feeling and thinking, because people are complex and people are bewildering. So you're a bewildered poet and you have an issue and it's bugging you and you don't know. Am I thinking this? Am I thinking that? What am I feeling? I'm feeling this, but why? Why am I feeling this? So you start to write a poem with that in mind to try to figure it out. You reach a point where at some point in your writing, you hold it up. Like you hold up this sheet of paper and you read it again and again. And at some point you think, yes, this language conveys this, whatever's happening in my mind that I'm still unsure about, this is working itself out in the poem somehow. And that's when, you know, that poem is finished for the day. You might come back to it later. You see, it's like with visual artists. You see a painter and they're painting and you'll say, oh, that looks done. And they'll say, no, it's not done. So what is it that's missing? This is art. This is art. This is not essay writing. It's art. The artist is not done. It's as simple as that. Then the artist has a gut feeling it's done, and they put it aside. It's not about, they don't come to the poem with an aim. I am in love with my girlfriend. I will write about that. I love you so much, my girlfriend, because you have these characteristics. I will love you till the day I die. You read that poem, it's superficial. Everyone knows that love doesn't work like that. That's not art. That's not art. That's a letter. That's a note to someone, you know? So, oh yeah. So then there's a favorite poem of mine in this book, in Sterlution by Lucy Brock-Broido, and I thought it was very telling because it's called Nonfiction Poem. So what I'll do is I'll try to find either a link or I'll just take a photo and insert it, but I thought I'd read it. So Nonfiction Poem. Tonight you wear a jacket lined with the shot silk of your early years, color of the silver dull, Irish farthings in relief of little liars. Is it true I will not be here to look after you? What will? Who will comb your cowlick down? Never minding the girl of myself I once ruined wittingly with magnolia boughs and wilfulness. For example, my extravagance of gesture, the maize field fallowed from simplicity, redundancy, the green wind of reckoning. Did you say I've said lark for the last allotted time? Have I ever, even once, been disingenuous, not told you of the truth and nothing but? I love the way she describes the Irish farthings in relief of little liars, liars, L-Y-R-E-S, but it sounds like liar, like lying, like telling a falsehood. And that, for example, right in the middle is hysterical because it pretends like she's making an argument, but the argument is, it's an odd one for sure. It doesn't follow the usual rules of an argument. Now, extravagance of gesture is so Lucy Brock-Broido. And then the maize field fallowed from simplicity. This idea that, as far, I mean, from my understanding, put it in the comments if you have a different one, the idea that you've been growing simplicity, but now, you know, let's leave the field fallow a bit to get something more interesting. And redundancy, you know, that stupid thing that you hear, you know, charlatan poetry teachers say, which is there should be nothing redundant in your poem. Everything should be absolutely necessary. And that's another thing. Beware of charlatan teachers of creativity. And this goes back to my days of studying screenwriting and my brief period of working in the screenwriting industry. Wow, there's a lot of people out to make a buck, and they usually will have advice that sounds brilliant and has nothing of helpfulness. It's not helpful, it's not useful, and it's the opposite of creativity. I think that Lucy Brock-Broido in this poem is pointing to some of those things. You know, the idea that am I not allowed to say lark anymore? Have I used that up my allotted time? You know, if you're a really good poet like Lucy Brock-Broido, you do what you want to. You do what you want to. And she does it so magnificently. I really want to wear her jacket lined with a shot silk. Yeah. When she writes, is it true I will not be here to look after you, what will? In a way, just because of the week I've had with the thoughts I've been going through, I thought of it in a way as a poet saying to the reader, look, in a way, you're on your own with this poem. You know, I've written poems, I've put them out in the world. I'm not going to come back and explain things to you because actually this poem is yours, is for you. Do with it what you want. Yeah? There's a sense of giving up control as a poet. And if a poet wants to pedantically control every single move the reader makes, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. Yeah. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to go finish my wine, and I'll see you next time. Let me know if you like this idea for a series. And don't forget, the only real property is the property of the mind. See you next time. Bye-bye.